McNeil.
Yes.
I'm Father Mary. Thank you.
You know, Malachi Martin has a lot of great insights, and Malachi Martin is proved correct year after year. People thought he was a nutcase. The longer things go, the more people realize Malachi Martin had some serious insights into what was going on in the church, and that was the 1980s. Once when I was in Rome, met a man who had been the driver for Malachi Martin, knew Malachi Martin well. I said, so what's the deal? What's the 411 on Malachi Martin? You think he was legit? Was he making up stories? He said, Malachi Martin, he's a storyteller. He told true stories, but there's always a little flourish. But he said, you know, Malachi Martin was onto things. He just embellished a little bit. Having met Malachi Martin's driver and hearing that, that's kind of become my go-to take on Malachi Martin.
This guy's fascinating. He was the inspiration for the Exorcist movie back like in the late 70s. And he did hundreds of exorcisms. And he was talking up the New World Order back in the 80s when no one even knew what that was. Anyway, Malachi Brendan Martin was an Irish-born American traditionalist Catholic priest, biblical archaeologist, exorcist, paleographer, and professor, and writer on the Catholic Church. Born on July 23, 1921 in Ballylongford, County Kerry, Ireland, he studied at the Catholic University of Louvain in Belgium, receiving doctorates in Semitic languages, archaeology, and Oriental history. He further studied at Oxford and Hebrew University at Jerusalem before being ordained as a Jesuit priest in 1954. Okay, so this old boy had 3 PhDs, and he could speak a host of languages. Martin served as professor at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome and was the private secretary to Cardinal Austin Bay during the preparations for the Second Vatican Council. However, disillusioned by the reforms of Vatican II, he requested to be released from certain aspects of his Jesuit vows in 1964, after which he moved to New York City and eventually became an American citizen. So he didn't like all the liberal forms of Vatican II, and he got a special dispensation from the Pope, because, you know, he knew the Pope. He got a special dispensation from the Pope to let him free of his vows. And so he renounced his vow of chastity so he could make a living for himself. I mean, his vow of poverty so he could make a living for himself. But not chastity. He supposedly stayed chaste the rest of his life. There's some controversy about that. We'll get into that in a little bit. But anyway, he's interesting.
As St. Peter said, he's like a lion going around seeking whom he may devour. And he is intent on eviscerating the church, on corrupting your soul and my soul, destroying priesthood, removing the tabernacle, destroying all chastity and purity, completely destroying the family, and producing a world in which there is no church, there is no compassion, there is no pity, there is no love, there is no gentleness, and there is only death and pain and destruction. You know, I work with Satanists who are reformed, and they all tell me the 3 tests they have to go through in order to become a Satanist, an official Satanist. We'll touch on their existence, by the way, in a later conversation here today. But they have to kill, show they're indifferent to death. Usually they have a puppy dog or a cat or a kitten or something, or a bird. And they have to burn to show a love for fire. And thirdly, they have to be cruel. Not kill, but just cruel. Cause a dog or a cat or a bird or a human being to scream at pain but not kill them, and love to do it. That's the world of Lucifer. And by the way, if you look around at what we consider the blots in our landscape, whether it's Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York or cities in Canada, wherever it is, or Paris or London, what we call the seamy side, the inhuman side, is always filled with what? Death, arson, cruelty to children, to women, to men. So Satan's thumb mark is everywhere, the cloven hoof.
He wrote several books, and his most famous was the very first one, called Hostage to the Devil, which came out in 1976. Now, the movie The Exorcist came out in 1973. So this came right on the heels of that movie, and at a time when everyone was interested in demonic possession. It was a fad, and everybody was talking about it and writing about it. And, you know, preachers, they were saying that they were casting out devils when, in fact, they were just making it up for a book. But this guy wasn't making it up, apparently. He was the real deal. In fact, the movie The Exorcist, the lead character, Max von Sydow's character, was loosely based on Malachi Martin. So anyway, this guy, he's kind of a heavy hitter. Hostage to the Devil. The book details 5 case studies of alleged demonic possessions and their subsequent exorcisms. Martin claims to have had firsthand or very close secondhand knowledge of these events. Each case is presented with considerable detail, including the personal histories of those involved, the signs of possession, and the exorcism process. And if you'll listen to some of his interviews with Art Bell on YouTube, you'll get a real flavor for what he's saying. He goes further and details, you know, how exorcists get murdered by cultists. People who are going around doing exorcism have Satanists track them down and murder them. He categorizes the different types of possession. I would heartily recommend going and watching those videos of those radio broadcast interviews that he did. There are 7 of them. It's a lot to listen to, but if you go through them, you'll learn a lot, and he's kind of fascinating to listen to. He's a very charming, personable man.
Some people actually want to be possessed. They want to be holy Lucifers. I've met them. Believe me, it's as real as the nose on your face. And when they're perfectly possessed, they're completely urbane and calm and clean and efficient. They're good doctors, they're good lawyers, they're good architects, they're good bankers, they're good painters, they're good artists, they're good dancers. They're beautiful people. Die schöne Leute, as the Germans used to say. But they're not schöne at all. They're not beautiful at all. But they're perfectly possessed. They're Faust. They've signed the document for their soul to go. And it's a terrible thing. The extent of it is very big today. As I say, we have about over 8,000. It's 842. 8,042 was the last count I saw. These are worshipping covens composed of not ignorant men and women, not people who are stupid, on the road, homeless, jobless, No, these are doctors, lawyers, architects, brokers, painters, dancers, nuns, priests, cardinals, bishops.
Now, as I had said in the previous panel, he categorized possession into different forms, but there was one form that fascinated me. It's called perfect possession. It's a concept that he coined. Perfect possession, as described by Martin, refers to a state where a demon has completely taken over an individual, resulting in the loss of the person's free will and identity. In this scenario, the human host becomes indistinguishable from the possessing demon, with no visible signs of struggle or duality between the human and demonic presence. It has no obvious signs. Unlike traditional depictions of possession where physical and behavioral signs might be evident, like aversion to holy items, speaking in tongues, or violent behavior, the perfectly possessed person shows none of these symptoms. They appear normal, functioning in society without any outward indication of internal spiritual conflict. The demon has total control over the person's actions, thoughts, and will. The person is said to have willingly or through some spiritual vulnerability surrendered entirely to the demonic influence. Martin noted that those who are perfectly possessed are often highly sophisticated individuals, which might mask the possession further as they continue to operate in high positions or roles within society. And I think I've known a few people like that. You can spot them. They give off an aura, a darkness. and there isn't any conflict that comes from them. They're so thoroughly deluded by the demon within them that they actually have been convinced that they're doing good. Martin also talked about how many people in high places in society are actually Satanists too. He talks about that a lot. He talks a lot about Satanism in his interviews with Art Bell. But this is a fascinating concept, perfect possession, and I've known several people that I would characterize as being perfectly possessed. Now, his last and most controversial book was called Windswept House, published in 1996. The man died in 1999. It begins with a black mass in the Vatican in 1963, signaling the entrance of evil into the church's highest ranks. The narrative follows the life of a Slavic pope, clearly modeled after John Paul II, and the machinations to force his resignation to pave the way for the New World Order. Now, according to him, this really occurred. They really did have a black mass in some chapel there in the Vatican, and they sacrificed a kid, and then they also had a twin ceremony held at the same time across the Atlantic in North Carolina. And he swears up and down it happened, and he knows people who know about it, and it's really kind of dark. And essentially, he has said that the upper echelons of the Catholic Church have been hijacked by literal Satanists who have created an anti-church, a parallel shadow church that might on the surface look like the Catholic Church has always looked, but in reality is something quite different.
1963. The enthronement of the fallen archangel Lucifer was effected within the Roman Catholic citadel on June 29, 1963, a fitting date for the historic promise about to be fulfilled. And there could be no more perfect place than the chapel of St. Paul itself. Then every element of the celebration of the Calvary sacrifice must be turned on its head by the other and opposite celebration. The sacred must be profaned. The profane must be adored. The unbloody representation of the sacrifice of the nameless weakling on the cross must be replaced by the supreme and bloody violation of the dignity of the nameless one.
When they appoint some cardinal in some diocese and he's been covering up for like people who are child molesters,
yes,
or, like Theodore McCarrick or Cardinal Wuerl or those kind of guys. I mean,
or the Pope.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. I'm
Benedict.
Not Benny. Well, he was covering up, but so is the guy now.
Is he really?
Well, yeah. It's not great.
I thought he was like the more progressive Pope.
Oh, he's very progressive, yes,
but he's covering up for stuff as well. Well, they all are. I mean, it's a dark institution in a lot of ways because it's history.
Well, the institution, it was instituted by Christ, but that doesn't mean that it can't be flawed. And there's a school of thought that says it isn't what it purports to be anymore. It's moved away from what it was intended to be and what it is. Almost, there's a guy called Bishop Vigano who says it's a counterfeit parallel church. And it's running an entirely different religion.
Now, here's where it gets really tantalizingly creepy. But Martin claimed to have worked for what he referred to as the Vatican Intelligence Network, or similar entities within the Vatican's administrative apparatus, particularly during his time in Rome before and during the Second Vatican Council. So apparently, according to Martin, the Vatican has its own organization similar to the CIA. Anyway, he was allegedly ordained as a bishop, sort of specially, so he could sneak into the Iron Curtain countries in Eastern Europe and secretly ordained men to be priests. Apparently, you have to be a bishop to be able to do that. So anyway, he was made a bishop, a special dispensation, and he went into Poland and Hungary and Czechoslovakia and all those countries, East Germany, and he ordained men to be priests, like, undercover priests, going around doing their priest stuff undercover. During a videotape memorial titled Malachi Martin Weeps for His Church, Rama Kumaraswamy claimed that Martin had told him that he had been secretly consecrated a bishop by Pius XII. Martin's mission was to ordain priests and bishops for the underground churches of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. Kumaraswamy died in 2006. Now, see, this is what raises questions with me, because this guy, Martin, he worked for this guy in color here, Bill Buckley. Now, Bill Buckley, he was supposedly a big conservative pundit in the United States back when. He belonged to what is called the Skull and Bones organization out of Yale, which is a very dark, sinister bunch of dudes. And Buckley was very close to this guy here in black and white, E. Howard Hunt. E. Howard Hunt was a CIA guy. He had CIA connections up his butt. And by his own admission, he was involved peripherally in the Kennedy assassination. So right here, you have Malachi Martin with some pretty heavy-duty contacts in the CIA. And then here he is, by his own words, saying that he worked as a spy for the Vatican. So when I hear this, red flags come up. Is the guy just a spook? Is the guy just a spook running a psyop on everyone? Who knows? As you might have expected, Martin's life and work were fraught with controversy, including allegations of personal misconduct and debates over his status within the church. He died on July 27th, 1999 in Manhattan due to a head injury from a fall, with some accounts suggesting supernatural elements involved in his death. And his death was kind of creepy. I'm going to put a collection of clips from a movie about his death. I'll put that in here probably at the very end, so you might want to hang on to watch that, because it's interesting. But what's the first thing they always do when they can't refute your arguments? What do? They resort to ad hominem attacks. They kill the messenger. In an attempt to undermine the effectiveness of Malachi Martin's communications, his opponents resorted to ad hominem attacks against him personally. At first, many of the attacks on Father Martin focused on the premise of doubting his status as a priest. There were rumors that Father Martin had left the priesthood and gotten married. The effectiveness of these attacks came to an end after Father Martin's death, when Father Vincent O'Keefe, a former vicar general of the Jesuit order, stated that Father Martin had received a dispensation to release him from his vows of poverty and obedience, but not chastity. He stated that Father Martin remained a valid priest all his life and had never married. So that was dispelled, and so then they had to resort to creating some sexual peccadillos on the fella, which, I don't think they hold water. But we'll get into that Robert next. Kaiser, a leftist journalist, claims that Malachi Martin had an affair with his wife during the time of the Second Vatican Council. However, it's been reported that he is a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. And also, we all know what leftists love to do to people they don't like, regarding their sexual history, concocting all kinds of bogus sexual charges, or taking something that might be sort of legitimate and embellishing it to the point that it looks really dirty, with Supreme Court justices and cabinet officials and what have you. It's a standard playbook that they always trot out with Trump, everybody, as if they were lily white clean themselves. But then there's another one here. The media sometimes reported that Father Martin was living with a female companion. The female companion was Kikia Livanos, an elderly Greek woman who was his housekeeper. She prepared his meals and did the tasks that housekeepers normally do. It is very common for Catholic priests to have a housekeeper, so there is nothing unusual about this situation. When Father Martin moved to New York, a cardinal advised him to find lodging with the family. Father Martin followed this advice and moved in with the Livanos family. At the time he moved in with them, they were what is called a nuclear family, consisting of mother, father, children living at home. As the decades passed, the number of people living in the household dwindled until only Kakia Livanos remained. So, yeah, he could have been banging her, but to me it looks kind of innocent, really. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, although he is buried with her. There's the gravestone there, and she's buried right next to him, which, that looks kind of suggestive a little bit, but not necessarily. I mean, they got old, they were living together there, and she was taking care of the house for him, and they just became really fast friends, and, they could have done that. He died before she did. She may have decided to be buried with him. Not him, because he died before she did. So when she kicked off, she might have just might have had herself buried next to him, independently of any decision Mr. Martin would have had to have come up with. So, that doesn't strike me as being determinative. All in all, this guy is a fascinating character. And if you really want to be entertained a little bit, read about him and listen to him. He's a pretty cool guy. I like him. But, and as far as I'm concerned, who cares if he was married to her secretly? I'm not a Catholic. I don't give a shit whether he marries somebody or not. That doesn't diminish his status, stature, or holiness in any way to me.
We did not talk an awful lot about his exorcisms, except the last one. I kept asking him not to do it, and he kept saying, well, I'm only going to be an assistant. Not much chance of that.
An exorcist has to be a very holy priest, protected by the graces of the church. And I think, again, in that last exorcism that he was involved with, I still believe that Malachi was the target and not that little girl. She was the bait.
And we had a featured article about a possible possession case we're working on, and they asked if we were interested in doing a prime time special on that, and we said, of course, we're interested. But we didn't know what was going to happen because the other girl didn't believe she was possessed, and we weren't sure either, and she said, I'm probably not going to have any reaction.
We got out, we walked over to where they were. The introductions were made, and then this little child, she just walks up to Malachi right over here. She looks up at him and she just says, you're Father Malachi, and do you think you're gonna help her? And at that point, I just knew that I was up against something that nothing had ever trained me for. And Malachi just kept on acting like she was a perfectly normal little girl. I knew something was off. Did I know she was possessed? No, but I knew something was off. We're talking about a 4-year-old child. She was innocence personified. There was no reason why this kid should have been afflicted in this way. Malachi just kind of gave me the look. As in, this is my turf now, Bob. You don't need to be here and you shouldn't be here. It was not my place to be in there at all. I came back for him 2 hours later. At the time, it was a beautiful summer day. I came down the driveway in my Jeep. I just remember their Ford Explorer. It was a tan vehicle. It was parked right about here, the caddy corner almost facing that house in the background. And everyone was already out saying their goodbyes or starting to say their goodbyes. I saw them proceeding out from the house in the back there. And I pulled up right over here. And I got out and I saw Malachi talking to the parents first. And then the parents were getting in the vehicle and they were helping the little child into the vehicle, into the back seat. And the mother had rolled the window down, and Malachi had walked, after he said goodbye to the parents, he had walked over to say goodbye to the child. And I remember when the window went down, just as he got there to the window, as the glass came down, I remember her face kind of framed in the window, and she just blew him a kiss. It was disgusting, it was lascivious. It was like something was defiling innocence at that moment. The kind of the way you might imagine a whore blowing a kiss to a John who just paid her $100. To the skeptics, I would say that the people that I met that day, they seemed like, in every way, the all-American family. There was nothing to indicate anything like that. Something went on in the conversations inside the house that convinced a senior exorcist of the Roman Catholic Church and Dr. Ramakumaraswamy, an actual medical psychiatrist, that something was afflicting this girl that was not of this world and could not be explained by modern medical science. The phone rang that morning, and it was Malachi's voice on the other end, speaking in a very strained, weak voice. And his exact words were, "Bob, I've taken a bit of a tumble." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I've hit my head. I was reaching for a book standing on a stool in my study, and I had the stool knocked out from under me." "What do you mean it was pushed out from under you?" And he said, "Well, apparently Old Scratch wasn't terribly happy what we just did up in Connecticut."
He said he wanted me to know that he hadn't fallen. It wasn't a fall. This creature had grabbed him on, just above his ankle and caused him to fall.